I wasn't prepared for this letter. When I first opened it, I thought it was going to be just another story of betrayal, but this one hit different. It's from a woman who thought she had the perfect life. She loved her husband, trusted him completely, and then one knock at the door changed everything. She writes, Brenda, I was doing laundry when the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was a delivery. But something told me to go. There stood a girl, barely 20, holding a small duffel bag in a trembling voice. And then she said it. I think your husband is my father. Imagine hearing that out of nowhere. At first, she thought it was some mistake. Maybe the girl had confused names. Maybe her husband had been kind to someone once, and it was being misunderstood. But deep down, something cracked. The kind of crack you don't feel unless you already sensed something wasn't right. And now, it was bubbling to the surface. She invited the girl in, sat her down, offered her tea, as if she could soothe this storm with chamomile. But the more the girl talked, the more she felt like a stranger in her own home. Her husband had told this young woman he was divorced, that he lived alone, that he was a consultant who traveled often, which, of course, explained all the weeks he was working. She said she listened in silence. Not because she was calm, but because her body had gone cold. Shock does that to you. You stop feeling. You just observe. She waited for her husband to come home that night, not knowing whether she'd confront him or run. She didn't do either. She did something worse. She acted like nothing happened. Set the table, served dinner, watched his face, every blink, every bite, every breath. She needed to see the lie on his lips before she accused him. And he smiled, told her she looked beautiful, like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't been living a double life. That's when she knew it was true. She writes, Brenda, I had to know how far it went. I needed proof, so I started digging. And what she found next would make any woman question everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and herself. That night, after he fell asleep, she went searching. Not just for evidence, for answers. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but something inside her whispered where to start. Their bedroom closet, behind his perfectly organized suits and rows of polished shoes, there was an old box she had never seen before. It was tucked behind a suitcase they hadn't used in years. The box was taped shut, as if he wanted to forget it existed. But the moment she opened it, time stopped. Inside were letters, dozens of them, from the same girl who had come to her door. Each one filled with love, questions, stories. Some were recent, others were 10, 15 years old. She read them under the faint glow of her bedside lamp, heart racing. They were drawings from when the girl was little. Pictures, some of him holding a toddler, others of holidays she never knew he had spent away. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a second life, a second family, a daughter who had grown up thinking he was someone else. She tried to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Her mind was doing the math. The letters went back to the time when she had suffered her second miscarriage, when he had gone on a retreat to clear his head. She remembered how he had come back distant, but kind. She thought it was grief. Now she realized it was guilt. She writes, I didn't wake him. I couldn't look at him. I felt like a guest in my own life. My home wasn't mine. My marriage was a script I'd been acting out, and I didn't even know the ending. So she made a decision. She would confront him, not with rage, but with the truth. His truth, the one he buried in that box. The next morning, she cooked his favorite breakfast, sat across from him, and placed one of the letters gently on his plate. He froze, eyes wide. Then he whispered, Where did you find that? And she said, Right next to everything you threw away. He didn't deny it, didn't even try. But what he said next, that was the beginning of the end, and the start of a revelation she never saw coming. He didn't cry, he didn't beg. He simply nodded, as if he had rehearsed this moment in his mind more times than he could count. Then he said something that pierced deeper than any excuse. I never stopped loving her. But I couldn't leave you. She stared at him, her hands shaking around the coffee mug. Was that supposed to be comforting? He went on to explain how it all started. How he had met the other woman at a conference during one of their difficult years. He said it was supposed to be just one night. But when she told him she was pregnant, he couldn't walk away. He didn't have the courage to live a double life. So he built one in the shadows. Every business trip, every sudden weekend out of town, all of it had been carefully designed. And the worst part, he said he always planned to tell her. But then life happened, and then it got too late. Her voice trembled when she asked, And what about me? What about our life? He looked at her, eyes hollow, and said, I loved you too. I still do. That's when she realized this wasn't a love triangle. It was a story of selfishness wrapped in sentiment. He had built an entire world where he never had to choose, and now everything was crumbling, and he wanted sympathy. She stood up, walked to the sink, and stared at her reflection in the window. Do you even know who I am anymore? She asked. He didn't answer. That night, they slept in separate rooms, not out of anger, but because something between them had finally broken in a way that couldn't be mended with apologies. She lay awake, thinking about every year they had spent together, every milestone, every whispered promise, and now all of it felt like a script from a life she no longer recognized. In the morning, he was gone. Not gone for good, just gone, to work, as if nothing had changed. But she knew everything had. She looked at the empty bed and realized that, even when he was there, he had been absent in all the ways that mattered. And for the first time, she stopped blaming the other woman. The betrayal wasn't in what was hidden, it was in what had been missing all along. But as painful as that moment was, it was also the beginning of her awakening. Because when someone strips away your truth, you have two choices: collapse, or rebuild something stronger. He thought about reaching out to the woman, not to confront her but to understand. Curiosity had a strange way of clinging to grief. Who was this person who had taken so much without ever asking? But when she finally saw her, it wasn't through a dramatic meeting, it was at the grocery store, of all places, pushing a cart with a child that looked hauntingly familiar. Her legs almost gave out when the girl turned and smiled, because in that face she saw her husband, the same dimple, the same curious eyes. That child was his. There was no denying it, and for a brief, gut-wrenching second, she realized this woman wasn't just his lover. She was part of his second life, walking through the world without shame, without apology. The woman looked up and noticed her staring. Their eyes met. No words were spoken, but there was a flicker of recognition, maybe even guilt, or maybe it was pity, and that made it worse. She didn't want pity. She wanted answers. She wanted rage. But instead, she walked away in silence, the scream lodged deep in her chest. At home, she collapsed on the couch, numb. Her husband arrived later that evening, carrying takeout like nothing had happened. She didn't mention what she had seen. Not yet. She wanted to sit with the truth first, to let it settle into her bones before she decided what to do with it. Because this wasn't just about betrayal. This was about identity. By years she had been the good wife, supportive, loyal, forgiving, even when things felt off. And now, she was face to face with the version of herself that had been buried under all those compromises. She didn't know whether to cry or scream, but she knew she couldn't go back to pretending. Later that night, as he scrolled through his phone beside her, she studied him, not the man she had married, but the stranger who had shared her bed, who had kissed her and lied, who had smiled at their anniversary dinner, while another woman raised his child. And she asked herself one terrifying question: had she ever truly known him? But even scarier than that was the realization that maybe she didn't know herself anymore either. She spent the next few days in a haze, moving through her routines like a ghost in her own life. Every cup of coffee, every folded shirt, every casual kiss on the cheek felt like a performance she no longer believed in. Her body was present, but her soul had stepped outside, watching everything from a distance. And through it all, he remained the same charming, affectionate, and utterly unreadable. One evening, she found herself scrolling through old photos on her phone. Birthdays, vacations, holidays where he had been working late or too tired to travel. And suddenly, each excuse had a new meaning. Every blurry smile was a lie she hadn't seen. Each memory she had cherished now carried a bitter aftertaste of deception. It was like discovering her past had been rewritten without her permission. She didn't cry. Not this time. She had cried enough for the woman she used to be. Now she was becoming someone else, someone who didn't need permission to feel angry, to feel betrayed, to feel powerful. And in that quiet rebellion, something inside her started to shift. For the first time, she wasn't just mourning the loss of her marriage. She was mourning the version of herself who accepted less than she deserved. At dinner, she watched him talk about work, nodding along while a storm brewed behind her eyes. He noticed nothing. Not the way she gripped her fork. Not the flicker of disdain in her voice. He lived in a world where his lies had no consequences, where she was too kind to ever walk away. But kindness has limits, and hers had been crossed. she started noticing patterns, the secret phone calls, the sudden change in passwords, the faint scent of a different perfume on his shirt. Each clue was a piece of the puzzle she hadn't wanted to complete. But now, one rainy afternoon, while folding laundry in their bedroom, she knocked over one of his drawers. It slid too far out and fell, scattering papers across the hardwood floor. As she bent down to gather them, an unmarked envelope slipped from between two folders. It was sealed. Thicky had hidden it. She could tell by the way it had been wedged deep inside. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew without opening it that this envelope held something he never meant her to find. She hesitated, fingers trembling, but curiosity won. She peeled it open and found photos, not of her, not of their family, but of him with another woman, laughing, kissing, holding hands on a beach she'd never been to. The woman wasn't just anyone. She was someone Claire knew, someone she had welcomed into their home. Her best friend. It was as if the world stopped. The rain outside became a dull whisper compared to the storm inside her. Her knees gave way, and she sank to the floor. The pictures spread around her like daggers. How long had this been going on? How many times had she hugged her friend, poured wine for her, shared secrets, never knowing that she had stolen the one thing Claire thought was safe? Claire didn't scream. She didn't even cry. She sat in silence, letting the betrayal settle in her bones. It wasn't just infidelity. It was war. And suddenly, every moment replayed in her mind. The late-night calls, the way her friend had stopped visiting so often, the awkward glances when the three of them were together. A week passed. Claire played her role, flawlessly laughing at his jokes, making his favorite meals, even pretending to be too tired for questions. But every moment was a rehearsal for what came next. She started watching him more closely, noting the days he came home late, the times he claimed to be working late or stuck in traffic. She wasn't looking for more lies, she was collecting evidence. And it didn't take long. One Thursday evening, he left in a rush, forgetting to take his phone. That never happened. Claire stared at the buzzing screen for a moment before giving in. One swipe revealed his calendar, a repeating weekly entry labeled, Meeting, Unit 3C. Her stomach turned. That wasn't a work thing. That was an address. Claire recognized the building. It was across town, near where her best friend used to live. She didn't waste time. She threw on a coat, grabbed her keys, and drove through the rain, her hands shaking on the wheel. The building looked old but well kept. She buzzed in behind a delivery guy and made her way to the third floor, apartment 3C. Her breath caught in her throat as she stood before the door, heart pounding, palms sweating. She knocked. No one answered, but the door. It wasn't locked. It creaked open just enough for her to peek inside. What she saw broke something inside her. There were photos on the wall. Him and her best friend. A toothbrush beside his. A second pair of slippers by the door. This wasn't a... Claire returned home before him. She reheated the dinner she had made earlier and set the table just like always. When he walked through the door, dripping with rain and fake excuses, she smiled. "Long day?" she asked softly, pouring his wine. He didn't suspect a thing. He didn't know she had just stood in the middle of the life he built with another woman. And she wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd broken her. Over the next few days, Claire kept up the performance. She laughed at his jokes, touched his arm at just the right moments, made him believe everything was fine, but inside, she was unraveling. Every moment they shared now felt like poison. Every "I love you" he uttered made her stomach twist, but she set it back because she needed him to feel safe, safe enough to be sloppy. Meanwhile, Claire was digging. She opened a private bank account. She copied important documents. She backed up photos, took pictures of the apartment, even checked the lease online, and when she saw whose name was listed as a co-tenant, her best friend's, she didn't even flinch. It was confirmation, not a surprise. Betrayal, when anticipated, loses its power to shock. She started calling lawyers, quietly, discreetly. She knew she didn't want revenge just for her own sake. She wanted to protect her daughter from this kind of duplicity. She couldn't bear the thought of her child growing up watching her mother being treated like a fool. No, Claire had to show strength now. Not just as a wife, but as a mother. But even it was a Sunday morning when Claire decided she was done pretending. The house was quiet, the rain tapping gently against the windows, and her daughter was napping upstairs. She called him into the kitchen. Her voice was calm, too calm. He walked in, coffee in hand, unsuspecting, That's when she slid the folder across the table. Inside photos, bank records, lease agreements, and a printout of the apartment listing with her best friend's name in bold letters. He blinked once, twice, then tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous," he stammered. "You're overreacting." But the blood drained from his face as Claire remained silent, her eyes fixed on him like glass. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. That's what shook him. He expected a breakdown, not a reckoning. And in that silence, he began to crumble. Claire finally spoke. "I know everything. And the part that hurts the most is that I wasn't even worth the truth." Her voice didn't shake. It sliced, and he had no words. Just a pathetic, stuttering apology that couldn't touch the depth of what he'd destroyed. She stood, slowly. "You can pack your things. You won't be staying here tonight," he begged. Not for forgiveness, but for comfort. For things to go back to the lie they used to be. But Claire had already left that world. She wasn't the woman who waited at the door anymore. She was the woman who opened it and let the trash walk itself out. Her best friend, of course, denied everything. The house felt different after they were gone. Quieter, yes, but lighter, too. As if every lie had weight. And now that they'd left, the air could finally breathe. Claire stood in the hallway, staring at the empty coat rack, the echo of his keys no longer jangling by the door. She wasn't just grieving a marriage, she was grieving the version of herself that believed in it so blindly. She focused on her daughter, built a new routine, painted the bedroom a soft green, started reading again, went to therapy. And little by little, the version of Claire who smiled out of obligation faded. In her place, a new woman emerged, one who didn't wait for apologies, one who didn't question her instincts anymore. She stopped asking why he did it. The answer didn't matter. What mattered was what came next. 6 months later, she received a letter, no return address. Inside was a photo of her ex-husband and her former best friend, with a baby. Her hands trembled, but not from anger, not even shock, just a deep, quiet sadness. They had moved on, built a new lie together. And for the first time, Claire didn't want to know more. She placed the photo in the drawer and closed it for good. Claire began journaling again. She wrote not to relive the pain, but to honor the journey. She realized healing isn't loud, it's quiet. It's choosing peace over proof, growth over vengeance. And in the solitude of those nights, she found herself, not the version shaped by betrayal, but the version forged in resilience. She no longer thought about what she'd lost. She thought about what she'd gained: clarity, strength, and the ability to walk away without losing herself. She knew her story wasn't unique. Sadly, too many women had lived it. But that's why she wanted it told.